Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Fateh.
Welcome to Encounters. Today we're still concentrating on the disclosures, the fallout of the disclosures, the report that has been issued, and the adequacy or otherwise of the Sikh response before the report was published and since. With me today are the Regional Midlands Coordinator of the Sikh Council UK, Jagtar Singh,
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
and the Head of Political Engagement, Gurinder Singh Josan.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Baji, if I begin by just stating the reason that we've asked you to come in today. We had asked you to take part and participate in the show that was on the 9th of February, which the Sikh Federation sent their representative, who actually took it as read that he would be more than willing to represent yourselves in the event that it was unfortunate that it was not possible for you to have your own representative there. He found it difficult to represent your position, and because of that we've now made arrangements for you to come and represent yourselves in front of the Sangat, so that they can understand the machinations, the processes that we went through as a community, but represented by yourselves. My first question is, what is the nature of the organisation and the representation of the community with which you lead?
Okay, Sikh Council UK is firstly, it's only been around 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And it's a membership-based organisation. The members of the Sikh Council UK are affiliated organisations. Most Gurdwara and the Jathebandiyaan campaigning organisations are affiliated Sikh Council UK. And each organisation, depending on the size of the organisation, sends 1, 2 or 3 delegates to a twice yearly General Assembly. And every 2 years, we at the October General Assembly, we elect a administration, which includes an executive committee. And on the executive committee you will have office bearers and other portfolio holders as well. And the executive committee also has the power to co-opt other people from within the community, so that may be to improve the gender balance or people with particular skills, etc.
Yeah.
In terms of,
so technically it's an umbrella organisation.
It's an umbrella organisation. We're very clear that Sikh Council UK is not there to run the show, if you like. We're not there to speak out and drive everything. Each of our individual member organisations are very, within their own right, are legitimate organisations, and each of them have their own role and profile and their own way of doing things. And we have protocols in place in which respect that. So, within the organisation, we had debates and discussions at different levels, and we will come to positions for the Sikh Council to hold.
Yeah.
And very often that might be different to our constituent member organisations or individual organisations or individuals. And the individuals who sit on the executive are there as representatives of their own organisation, but they're also there as a collective on behalf of the Bant as well. So there is a bigger picture there.
Baji, without sounding curt or anything of the kind, we are short of time today. The show that you didn't make it to was live. It did run over, but today we are curtailed by a 55-minute slot. For that reason, can we try and see if we can have answers that are informative but concise?
Okay.
Yeah, please. So moving on. It's an open question. Any of my questions, you're both free to answer them. Yep. They're not going to be directed at an individual per se. But with regard to what you've just said, it has a twice biannually you have a general assembly.
Yeah.
With the disclosure of these documents, was one even contemplated?
A General Assembly.
A General Assembly or an emergency General Assembly
what
to discuss the documents?
What we did do, and the key thing for us when the document came out, it was about looking outwards. If we were going to see any answers to all the questions we had on that first day, it was about engaging with the process, with the government, with parliamentarians, etc. And that necessitates a process which looks outwards, not inwards. So that was the first step, and the first step was really to take this into the media, take this to parliamentarians and make it widespread out there.
But without a core message
we
that had been agreed between all of the organisations you represent?
I think on the 13th of January was the day all the news broke about disclosure, and the first Saturday that came, the Sikh Council organised a Bantik meeting in Oldbury. So I think what you're asking was, did you have a mandate for what you did? And in that Bantik meeting, various decisions were taken about, so all organisations who are members and non-members turned up. So Gurdwaras that were members, and some of those that were even not members, they were there as well. I think over 200 delegates were there.
That's the 18th.
Yeah, and in that key decisions were taken, and one was to set up a steering group to look at how we can all come together. So all the different organisations that are working on this issue are establishing genocide took place, and further in full disclosure, a steering group. So all like-minded organisations that have been working. So Coalition 84, Genocide Coalition, there, Gear 3 led, Sikh Federation, and others that have been working on this issue to come together so they can pool their resources, pool their thoughts, and also work out a roadmap how we get to where we need to get to. So, and in that meeting, it was important that firstly we've all asked for full disclosure, and we need to carry on with that. And there were other thoughts about asking for independent inquiries and all those.
What does full disclosure mean?
Well,
we actually wrote to the Prime Minister on the 20th of January, and we defined in there what we meant by full disclosure. We thought that was really important because we were asking that from day one. And what we basically said is full disclosure means all the facts, all the documents on the table regarding June 1984 Hamanda Sabdi Hamla, leading up to that, and the actual attack itself. Then following on from that, the state of emergency, and then following up the November massacre and genocide, and onward from there. So basically, for me, full disclosure means that every document, every fact relating to the UK government involvement in whatever happened in India, and I wouldn't even put a time scale on it. I'd say, from 1984, before 1984, up until 1995, when all this was going on. What was the UK involvement in all of that? Now the understanding.
At what point did you make that announcement?
The call for full disclosure was done on the first day. We put a press release out on the 13th, asking for full disclosure for everything.
This is before any general meeting or Bantik
meeting
in Birmingham.
And sorry, just to go back to your previous question, the way we get our internal policy stuff on the hoof like this, we have a policy and strategy committee, which there's 7-8 of us on that committee.
On a strategy committee?
Policy and strategy group.
Is anyone legally trained on that committee?
We've got lawyers on there as well.
Parliamentary law?
Not parliamentary law, but we've got people on there with different skill sets, people who've been engaged in political processes, people who have very good links with parliamentarians, and people who have been involved in political campaigning for a very long time. So have a good understanding of how all that works. I don't think it's necessary to have a parliamentary law expert amongst that. We're not
trying to the Prime Minister on the 20th.
We're not trying to frame legislation, which is why you would need a parliamentary lawyer. But in terms of the political process, it's about understanding how politics works and about how parliamentarians work and how the political process works.
With that in mind, on the 20th, you've asked for full disclosure and given a... I'll read it again, but you have read it yourself. You've just said it yourself. Just then. That what it actually means, what full disclosure actually is. The letter of the 20th says, full disclosure will require publication of all documents and facts in relation to the UK government involvement before, during and after the attack on the Golden Temple. You have subsequent to that asked the government to refer to the Golden Temple as Sikh Madrasa.
Yes.
But in this letter, 4 times you've referred to it as the Golden Temple yourselves. As well as during the ensuing state of emergency and during and after the Sikh genocide following Indira Gandhi's assassination in October 1984. That is quite wide-ranging.
I think.
Did you genuinely, or do you still genuinely think that was possible for a government to concede to?
I think we needed to set out our stall in terms of what would satisfy the Sikhs overall. But I think I always had in the back of my mind that we're never going to get all of that.
So why did you ask for
it?
Never
because you have to ask for something.
You have to ask for something that's achievable after 30 years of wait.
I think. You see, you've got a government here who wasn't in power 30 years ago. If they want to give us that, they can. It's in their power to do that. Yeah.
To ask for a wide-ranging
They
inquiry,
absolutely. Well,
where they don't know where the
that's not
conclusion is
asking
going
for
to
an
go.
inquiry. Full disclosure was asking for all those facts to be put on the table. Alongside that, our discussions with parliamentarians were along the lines that, okay, they're looking at a defined period. Yeah. Let them look at that and let them put the documents or facts in relation to that on the table. But then we have to have and we talked about this at the meeting with the Cabinet Secretary as well on the 19th. 20, no, sorry, forgot the date now.
29th.
29th, yeah. And we said to them, we also need to, if that was the remit of their inquiry, then there needs to be a mechanism put in place which gives us ongoing disclosure. Yeah, and the reason why we say that is because the process in this country works in that the 30-year rule, which is now being reduced to a 20-year rule.
Yeah, in effect from 2020.
Yeah, but they're in the transition period for that. So what that means is every year they are publishing 2 lots of documents. Yeah, and then it becomes a 20-year rule. Every year they should have a presumption amongst ministers that they will release all documents in relation to this. So whereas they may not release them today, in the future, every year those files come up to be reviewed, the presumption should be that they will all be released.
So we're looking at a series of agitations and...
I think what we requested in that meeting with the Cabinet Secretary was that rather than the community being drip-fed with all the information, why don't you bring key dates into this inquiry? So the June 84...
Is there a precedent for that? Have they ever done that before?
It's in their prerogative to do that. It's not. There's no standing or parliamentary law that they can't, and they agreed with us in that situation. But we said was like,
but is there a precedent for it?
They can disclose documents.
Has it happened before?
I'm sure in the Hillsborough inquiry and in the all the process around that, they've disclosed documents earlier. But they do have the power.
They haven't disclosed full disclosure until they set up an inquiry.
Yeah, many years later.
But that was a call for an inquiry.
The question they've done it early.
The question we asked the Cabinet
Secretary. It took 30 years.
No.
What I'm saying, the question we asked the Cabinet Secretary was, is it possible to do? Are there any anything to hold that back? And the answer was no. If the minister deemed fit, then there's no law that holds that back. So we said, why don't you put this inquiry? Because the next disclosure is going to be in August of this year.
Yeah.
So why don't you, especially what happened in Delhi, bring anything that you might have been involved or any dialogue you had with India at that time, bring it forward and have it in this inquiry. So that's what we pressed on.
But this wasn't an inquiry. It was
this review. This review.
Yeah.
This inquiry or review. Why don't you place all the information in this review rather than being drip fed further down the year? But they've
kind of kept the door open for that.
Yeah. What they said is that we'll release further documents.
They've kept the door open.
Yeah.
They kept the door open.
Have we in effect allowed them
disclosures.
not to open the door fully by our response? Let me ask you another question. With regard to the remit, at what point did you ask for the clarification on the remit?
We asked for that at the meeting of the 29th.
On the 29th.
Yeah.
So pretty much after the report was complete and ready to be published.
It was close to.
Why was that not done on the 13th, 14th or the 15th?
That's a fair point, and that's something we should have done earlier on, and that's we should have asked on the
Was
first day.
Was that discussed on the 18th at the Pontic meeting in Birmingham?
No,
it wasn't.
It wasn't discussed. But what
the first day
you had a strategic team of 7 to 8 members, some that had legal experience, but none that had parliamentary experience. Nobody mentioned up until the 29th that the remit requires.
Well, there was an understanding of the remit, which was what the Prime Minister had said during Prime Minister's questions. And this is the dialogue we had with the Cabinet Secretary, because our understanding was that this is going to look at the events of 1984 June and the events around it. So our understanding was that it'll go further, but they've kept it very, very tight, very concise. So they're looking at those 2 documents that were disclosed, what led up to those 2 documents, which is started in December, and then the cut-off is in June of 1984. What we were looking at and what we were pressing for in that meeting, when we found out the remit was fairly narrow, for them to go further. And they did go further, somewhat, not enough. And when we mentioned other operations that took place post-June 1984, so Operation Black Thunder, Operation Woodrose.
Woodrose was 1984 June.
Yes. So when we mentioned those, the Cabinet Secretary and his colleagues said they'll look into that. And when they did report, they said they've looked into it, not thoroughly, but what they have looked into, there was no involvement, British involvement in those operations either. So that there was something to be gained from that meeting. But you are correct, maybe in hindsight, and to be honest, we're maturing as well, that we should have looked at that remit much more closely, much earlier.
But I think the other side of that is you can ask for their remit, and you can get that, and you can dissect it. The other thing, what we were very proactive about, was making clear what we wanted. So that letter you read out, other things we did over that period of time through other parliamentarians, etc., was we made it very clear that this is what we expected.
Yeah.
So even though the remit didn't
but it's not constructive.
Well,
because you have a set remit which you haven't asked for, which you can't then counter and ask for that remit to be adjusted because you haven't asked for the actual remit.
But I don't.
But the remit wouldn't have changed.
I don't think there's much you could have done at that stage in any case. Once the remit
it could have been made an issue of.
Well, we are making an issue. We are making an issue.
It can be changed.
We are making an issue.
Many a review, internal review, has become an inquiry. Many, including Iraq. The Butler inquiry began as a review, and then became a full-fledged judge-led, Lord Butler led the inquiry. Yeah,
and
I'm pretty sure the Chilcot inquiry was the same. It began as an internal review and then morphed into an inquiry.
And there's nothing
only with public support. Is that even possible? Is that even imaginable?
There's nothing saying that can't happen even now.
Well, it can, because the review's finished and the report's published.
Whatever stage.
You can now start from the beginning, but now you're going to be at an issue where you're going to ask for something to be reviewed or investigated, which they're going to say they've already done. Not during the process of. That the process you've begun needs expanding. It needs to be more.
They've done an internal review, and even they would understand the very difference of an internal review and an independent inquiry. Yeah?
Of course they would.
So calling for an independent inquiry is a totally different thing than that review. So
of course, but we didn't call for an independent inquiry.
Even though the review is finished, it doesn't mean you can't start an independent inquiry now. It can still all happen. Yeah? I think what
has an opportunity been lost? That's the question.
I don't think it has. I think this is growing, and I think they've actually miscalculated on this. And what they should have done was, if they were clever, they would have said, okay, we're going to throw the doors open and we'll put everything in public domain. And in fact, that is what they said at the meeting on the 29th. That's what the Cabinet Secretary said. They want to be as transparent as they possibly can. And what he referred to there was the only things they would hold back, the only documents they would hold back, are those by convention they don't usually publish, which are to do with the security services or the SAS operational documents. Yeah, I think. But even though conventions are conventions, they ministers can still decide. Well, actually, we're gonna publish these documents.
Or those documents can be viewed.
Will they do that off their own back?
Just going on to that previous point. On the 13th, we heard about these letters coming out. And there was a surprise, and we were all shocked. None of us expected it. None of us knew it. Yeah. And so the Prime Minister ordered the inquiry.
Only on the Saturday,
the Prime Minister. We found out Monday.
I couldn't be the only person.
Yeah. Well, we found out on Monday.
I found out on the Sunday night.
During the Sunday night.
We had the documents on the Sunday night.
But my point is, the inquiry was set up without any of our involvement. So the news breaks on Monday. The Prime Minister gives a press release on Monday night. By Tuesday evening, there's an inquiry. So, and we've had no input into what it's going to be.
Whatsoever.
No, because at that time nobody knew that the Prime Minister is going to act so quickly. So we were asking for full disclosure, like everybody else, because we wanted to know which other documents were in the background. So your questions are valid, but if you look at the timings, none of us had an input into which type of inquiry the Prime Minister was going to order. So on Tuesday, so you're looking at now the 14th of January, there's an inquiry that's been ordered, and then it's confirmed on Wednesday, Prime Minister's questions. So the remit, the scope, and who's going to be carrying out, that's already been set in stone.
Well, not in stone.
Well, it's set in stone because by that time. And the only influence we could have was when we asked for that, when the parliamentarians went to see the Cabinet Secretary the following week. I think Pat McFadden went and Paul Uppal, I think, went as well. And just to see, just to make sure the Cabinet Secretary was aware what Sikh sentiments, Sikh feelings were. That's when we started to influence a little bit more, and then where information started coming out as to the scope of that inquiry. And we had a week, 10 days before that, made approaches, and that we wanted a meeting to meet with the Cabinet Secretary. So, but all that takes a few days. And to be honest, all this has happened very quickly. Maybe we would have been sitting here a month later saying, actually, why hasn't the government done anything? So, a month late down the line, we've had an inquiry. It might not be what we wanted, but we have more information than before, and we need, as a community, need to now move forward and ask for the full details.
I think the other thing with all this, the Prime Minister moved very quickly, but he only did the bare minimum he needed to do. And the internal review by a civil servant is pretty much the bare minimum he could have done in the circumstances.
But the bare minimum he needed to do has in effect wrong-footed you.
Well, it didn't, because what he did...
Well, it did, because, like you said, on the Monday, the disclosure was made. By the Tuesday, an inquiry was done, and by Wednesday, it was set in stone. And you've just absolved yourself from all responsibility because there's nothing you could do from the Wednesday onwards.
That's not what we're saying.
So what was the purpose of the Pontic meeting on the Saturday, on the 18th of January? What was the purpose of that meeting?
The purpose of the Pontic meeting was to bring the band together and to come up with some ideas of how we escalate this.
But escalate what? It was already set in stone.
No, that was set in stone, but that doesn't mean that we agreed with it.
What were you going to influence? Even with the meeting with Sir Jeremy Haywood on the 29th?
Our process was about defining what we wanted from day one. Yeah, so we wanted full disclosure.
But by day 3, you'd had no input on it, and it was set in stone.
But that doesn't mean
we as a Sikh community.
That doesn't mean you don't carry on lobbying for it or calling for it.
Lobbying for what?
For full disclosure. That doesn't mean even today
you're lobbying on such a complex issue by adding peripheral. No one's suggesting that Woodrow's November 1984. No one's suggesting that they are insignificant. By no means at all.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is they were peripheral to the attack on the Shaykh al-Mandar Sahib in June.
Well, what we asked
this was a very specific and very narrow subject matter, which because of its own the size of the magnitude of the entire situation, deserves its own inquiry.
But the remit,
but you added it and made it so vast that I don't think any government in the world would agree to the full disclosure inquiry that you'd asked for.
No, hang on. We've not asked for an inquiry.
And you haven't been able to give me a precedent.
No, Paddy, that is asking for full disclosure. It doesn't define how. Yeah, and secondly, this is the discussion we had with the Cabinet Secretary as well. So you whatever inquiry they've done, that's fine, and that's reported. Yeah, the next step is you can ask for an independent inquiry into that process.
What you've actually said here is the Sikh Council UK is pleased that you have listened to our calls for an urgent inquiry. This wasn't an inquiry.
Well, review an inquiry, how we want to define it.
But you say
as a result of this inquiry, it is imperative that there is a full disclosure of the truth in relation to this period, not to this incident, but this period.
Yeah, and then it goes on to define what full disclosure
means. And it goes on to define that full disclosure includes more than what those documents talk about.
You're right that there is always going to be a limit to this process, and that's what that recognised. So when this process finishes, how do you get full disclosure going on after that?
How you do it? From the people I've spoken to, and I've spoken to solicitors, and I've spoken to councillors, 2 non-Sikh councillors, who both suggest that where our leadership or representation has made a mistake is that it should have asked for an inquiry into Operation Blue Star and what the British government knows about it.
But that is the
possible involvement.
That is
and
the
only
outcome.
Operation Blue Star, and that inquiry and its results and conclusions would have raised the questions for further inquiries. That this issue that the Sikh community feel is one big lump issue is actually going to require several inquiries.
But that isn't that what the government? Isn't that what the government has done? Isn't that what the Prime Minister has done? He's ordered an inquiry into the British involvement of the June Darbar Sahib attack in 1984, and we have the findings of the inquiry in front of us. So if that's what the councillors or the people that you've spoken to have said, that's what we've got. And what they've said, we will disclose.
That you haven't got that by design.
No, but the point is,
there's no guarantee you're getting another inquiry. You didn't get an inquiry now. You got a review.
But that's what we've had now, with 5 further disclosures, 5 further letters, and so I'm not sure what else you can be achieved by having an inquiry. When you say whether it's an inquiry or a review, the Prime Minister's referred to it as a review in the Prime Minister's questions.
Indeed.
The following day on Thursday, he refers to it as an inquiry. So as far as we are concerned, it's it is an inquiry.
But you didn't ask for clarification till the 29th.
But no, I'm saying that you're saying it's
what
not
do you
review
call
or
a review
inquiry.
or inquiry? It doesn't make
Any difference because the Prime Minister refers to it as the same. During the Prime Minister's questions, he said it's a review. The following day, when he does the address to the Sikhs...
So basically, you're going to rest the defence on the semantics of whether it's a review or an inquiry.
No, what we're saying is that what you're saying...
An inquiry would have witnesses giving statements.
I think...
Yeah?
Well, that's
a major difference between a review. A review is an
individual
asking for the cooperation of individuals, and if those individuals decide that actually I don't have time to speak to you, they won't have any input or involvement in the process of that review.
So Jeremy Haywood has told us that every single person who's named in those documents who's still alive has been spoken to as part of this inquiry. They've spoken to them and asked them what their recollection is over this period.
Including the Foreign Secretary and the Defence Secretary
at the time.
Yeah. So both have been spoken to. We've asked for, and parliamentarians have asked for, can you give us the outcome of those discussions? But that hasn't taken place. But in this review stroke inquiry, they have spoken to those that were involved, whose names were referred to in those documents, and other people as well.
And we knew from day one that when he announced whatever he announced, that was the bare minimum. We said that in the media. This is the bare minimum he could have done. Now, as a bare minimum, you're going to be limited what you get out of it. So wherever we are, and this was part of the.
Were you pleased with it?
No.
But the lessons the Prime Minister says you were.
What we were pleased with was that he moved quickly to announce a review. Do
you think he wrong-footed you by the speed with all this happened?
I was surprised by it that he moved so quickly, but I think that reflected the amount of... Is it because of the
reflection? Does that reflect the seriousness of the matter?
It
that there was so much to lose for a government.
Yeah.
It reflects the seriousness.
That it's a damage limitation,
but also
quickly before you can organise yourselves.
But also it reflects. I think it reflects how quickly the community did organise themselves. If the community hadn't have organised themselves and got themselves out in the media and with parliamentarians so quickly, the Prime Minister wouldn't have seen the threat of it. And I think that is a reflection of the fact that the community did organise themselves and did get themselves vocal very quickly.
Vocal and organised are two very different things.
No, but we did both. We did both. I think we were organised as well.
Yourselves, the Sikh Federation, the Sikh Coalition 1984. What is your relationship with the Sikh Coalition 1984? Genocide Coalition 1984. I apologise.
They're not affiliated members of the Sikh Council UK.
Right.
But there are other organisations who aren't as well, other Gurdwara who aren't. But as far as we're concerned, we are open to work with everybody.
Right.
And this is a Bantuk Masala.
Did you work with them on this?
They came along to the meeting, the Bantuk meeting. They came to that. They were present there, and that was an open meeting. That wasn't just for our members. And there were other groups who didn't come to that, for example, Lord India Singh or the British Sikh Consultative Forum. They weren't represented at that Bantuk conference, but we do have a dialogue with them as well.
Yeah.
In terms of
I'm going to come on to that. I will come on to that.
Just going on to that, what's the relationship? Well, the relationship now is that we've coordinated a steering group, and they're part of that steering group. So
the 1984
Genocide Coalition,
Genocide Coalition, along with Gill as well.
Right.
So they're part of that steering group where individuals and organisations that have expertise in that field or have been working on that for many years are pooling thoughts and resources to ensure that they speak with a single voice.
Pooling thoughts?
No, pooling thoughts. And resources.
Okay.
So not everyone's just doing their own bit in isolation.
From Monday the 13th, yourselves. I don't mean you as individuals, but Sikh Council UK. And 1984 Sikh Genocide Coalition and Gill were absolutely everywhere media-wise. Not only the Western media, the mainstream media, but the Sikh media as well. There was a media frenzy that developed where almost every hour of the first 5 days was devoted to this topic here. Yet nobody asked or made any sort of representation of the government for that first week. And there was no Bantuk meeting until the Saturday. So a full 6 days later, there was actually official movement from the representatives and leadership of the Sikh community.
No, I think
but for the first 6 days...
The representatives of the various groups were talking in that time. There was lots of dialogue going on.
Informal.
informal
telephone
through
conversations and email.
Through email,
structures that
But
already
was the
exist.
congregation and the community at large, were they asked or were they approached in any way whatsoever?
Well, that was the reason for when you say that it was media frenzy wall to wall. That was how we can get the message out, and how others managed to get the message out.
What was that message for the
And
first
the message
week?
was that we were surprised, we were disappointed, and that we need to get to the bottom of what the UK in government's involvement is. So we, as organisations, and us especially as Sikh Council, as the umbrella body, and we will pursue that and vigorously, which we did.
Yeah, unfortunately for Encounters, we've invited Jagdish Singh onto this programme.
Right.
He's refused to come on.
Right, okay.
But he, alongside yourselves, was on Sikh media, was using phrases like the British have betrayed the Sikhs in 1849, in 1947, and now again in 1984. These British establishment has been anti-Sikh from day one. These are all things said by Jagdish Singh on Sikh media throughout that first week. Now, do you think that's constructive? Being him now,
to be honest,
is working and pooling thoughts with
everyone's
yourself.
entitled to their own view and how they see the world and how they see Sikh history.
Right.
And so
but he claims to represent me and the Sikh
well,
community.
he represents his organisation, which is the 1981.
But they're pulling thoughts with yourselves.
Yeah, but on what we have to learn.
They also
what we have to learn is that you're going to have to, when there's a serious issue, that we work together.
Yeah.
There might not be everything we agree on, but I think the Sikh public and the Sikh masses do expect their organisations who say we represent them to work together when there's an issue of such magnitude. And we in the Sikh Council have tried.
Well, are you working together or is that counterproductive?
Well, no, we're working together.
So you agree with that statement that he's just made?
No, working together on this issue.
Do you think that? Yeah. Do you think that statement he's just made about the British being the enemies of the Sikhs from day one? You agree with that sentiment?
No, I wouldn't agree. I think the way he portrayed that.
He has his way.
Well, then you're working at cross purposes, then clearly.
No, because look.
Well, you're trying to nurture
on this matter.
No. What I'm saying is, you're attempting to nurture some sort of liquid dialogue with the government, and you have somebody who claims to represent or work alongside you, making statements like that, and you're saying to me that that's not counterproductive.
I think what you have to understand is the Sikh community is not a homogenous community. It does have people with different views and
that's what I'm saying. So are you distancing yourself from the 1984 Genocide Coalition, or are you working with them?
We're part of the steering group. They are part of that.
They're part of the steering group.
And the level of working.
So there's more than one person driving the car.
There are
organisations that are working together on this issue. They're working on this issue, which we feel and the fund feel should work together.
And shouldn't they have a common goal?
I think the common goal is at the high level. The common goal for all of us is to get justice for 1984. That's the common goal. But different organisations will have different approaches, different methods, different strategies of doing that, and different messages along the way. Yeah.
So then how can you steer all of those different messages and different strategies?
Well, that's where
it's unworkable, is it not?
No, well, it's working.
Well, I think
it's
working. Is it working? What have we achieved?
We pulled people together. There are now 4 or 5 different strands of work which are taking off as we speak, and led by different organisations, but where everybody's talking to each other.
And they're not at cross purposes.
I don't think they're cross purposes.
Not on everything.
I think there may be elements where people disagree.
Okay,
that doesn't negate.
I met you both. Interviewed you both at Parliament, House of Commons, on the 22nd for Lobby Day.
Yes.
That day, Jagdish was on his way to 10 Downing Street to hand this letter in to the Prime Minister. Tell me if you think this is something you'd endorse.
I haven't seen that.
Have you not seen this letter? No? Okay, it's not signed simply by the coalition itself. It's actually signed by Peter Thatchell of the Peter Thatchell Foundation, Graham Williamson, Nations Without States, Phil Miller, the independent journalist who actually found the document, which Jagdish has actually claimed responsibility for on this very station, Sangat Television. He sat on our station and he was sitting with another member of the Gill, who suggested, or didn't just suggest, he blatantly said that the documents and the disclosure of them was 3 years worth of work, which has been day and night, has had money and resources spent on it, that these documents didn't find themselves. I've also interviewed Phil Miller on this very show, and he has said that the only contact he had with any Sikh organisation was zero. And that these documents were handed to the Tamil community with which he works, and they forwarded them to Jagdish.
Right.
I mean, from where I first saw them, they came in an email from Jagdish Singh. So the background before that...
I'll be honest with you,
the background
my
before
first
that,
contact with the documents were through Jagdish.
Yeah.
But the fact is,
the background before
Jagdish
that...
is not the person that disclosed these documents.
Well, look,
Phil Miller disclosed these
that's for other
documents.
people to know and understand. For us...
Well, I've spoken to Phil Miller himself,
unless
unless he's a liar.
For me...
No, but I think the point is that with that point, you interviewed Phil Miller at the Sikh lobby after you interviewed me.
I interviewed him in the studio.
And probably the studio as well.
Subsequently.
So, and I think that there is general acceptance across the board, and even from Jagdish Singh and others. That
well, he actually didn't correct the case
that Phil Miller was the gentleman that found these documents and then brought them out into the public domain. If it wasn't for him, then none of us even today would be talking about this issue.
Well, do you find that a statement of this kind is constructive when addressing the Prime Minister of the UK government? He's referring to the statement to the House by the Foreign Minister in 1984 in response to the question by John Watts MP as to regards of the government's has the government sought to discuss the events of June with the Indian government. He says this is a blatant lie to Parliament, and the world. Shouldn't he be asking the question if it's a lie? Or should he be telling the Prime Minister what he already knows without having to actually look into it? Is he asking the Prime Minister to look into that?
Well, that was one of the terms of reference for the inquiry that happened, where the Parliament was misled on.
Where
that
the
point.
Parliament was misled.
Yeah, that was one of the terms of reference. Now, Jagdish Singh will have his own way, and others will have their own way of putting that across.
But these people claim to represent us. They work with you.
They represent...
Do you have any influence over these people?
It represents the people who signed it. And the Sikh Council is set up in a way where our individual organisations are legitimate organisations in their own right. They have their own policy, their own way of working, etc. And on a bigger scheme, we try and bring people together and work together on the things that unite us. But individual organisations
have you attempted to work together
will have their own.
with Paul Apple?
Pardon?
Have you attempted to work with Paul Apple?
Absolutely, we have worked with Paul Apple.
And on this issue from day one.
From day one?
Yeah.
From day
Okay,
one.
on the 13th he began the petition.
He did.
On the 14th, Tom Watson began his petition. You supported Paul Apple through an email. Or two? Well, not two.
No, we sent it
two
out.
emails. We sent out 2 emails in support of Paul Apple's.
You sent out 2 emails.
Yeah.
But then you sent out 2 emails of Paul Apple.
And one for Tom Watson.
And one for Tom Watson.
Absolutely.
And the Tom Watson one was a press release.
That doesn't make any difference internally, or in terms
Not
of
internally.
Well, actually, it doesn't make any difference in terms of how it's portrayed. I tend to write the press release. Well, I write all the press releases from the Sikh Council. I was not around that night to write that press release. Therefore, it was sent out. We felt it was important that a message went out really quickly on it. So others took it on and wrote the message and sent it out in an email. Went to all the same people that it would go to otherwise. It can be quoted in the media. It can be used in the same way as a press release can. And it made very clear our support or our call for people to support Paul Apple's petition, just like the one with Tom Watson did.
And what would be the point in backing 2 petitions?
The Paul Apple petition came about really quickly.
They both were within 24 hours of each other.
Within 24 hours.
Right.
Well, actually, no. Tom Watson went live several days later. He asked for it. With the number 10 petition website, you have to submit the words and they approve it.
Right.
And that can take several days to be approved.
How long did it take?
What's the date on the petition?
The date on the petition?
On the press release.
On
the press release.
On the press release is the 19th.
There you go. So that was the day it was approved. And we, as soon as it was approved, we knew it was submitted. Tom Watson had told us. And the reason why that one was worthy of support as well was because that one is number 10 website. If you get 100,000 signatures on that, you can...
Did you approach Paul Apple to say join the 2? That you and... So effectively it would become cross-party. There'd be 2 MPs of the opposition and the government that would both be working together for one, rather than 5,000, 6,000 signatures. Do you know the facts with the signatures?
Yeah, it hasn't taken off in the way we
Well, Paul
expected.
Apples has 5,256
Yeah.
signatures
Yeah.
as of the 6th of February this year. And Tom Watson's has 1,610 signatures. The
I
one that
think-
you think is significant.
Well, no,
on the
we
YouGov
thought both
side.
were
We
significant. We
supported
thought both
both.
were significant for
Well,
different purposes.
if they were significant,
the reason why Paul
were there
Apples,
representations made?
the reason why Paul Apples has got more signatures because he came about first. He came about earlier, and
So
people.
did you back the wrong horse?
No, we backed both of them. We backed both of them because they both had a role to play within.
Why
this.
were they not joined? Did you make representations on them?
You know, one of the things you have to understand in this is how the political process works. Now, Paul Uppal is a Conservative MP. Yeah, he has a better link with the government as a Conservative government, Conservative Liberal Democrat
Right.
coalition government.
What are the differences between the two petitions?
There's not
Well,
much
I think the
difference.
petition.
What is the
no,
difference?
the Paul.
There's not
Paul.
much difference.
There's one glaring difference. Do you know the difference
Go on.
between the two petitions?
The Paul's petition was so that the seat, there was a big concern about these disclosures, and the government needs to act quickly.
Right.
So whereas Tom Watson's petition was to get to a certain number further down the line, which was probably a week, 10 days down the line, so that we can then ask for full disclosure, whichever means it
Okay.
takes.
This is the two petitions.
But
Paul Uppal's is I request that the British government launches an urgent inquiry into British involvement into the 1984 attack on Amritsar. Furthermore, we ask for the full disclosure of documents, including the months and days leading up to and after the attack. That's pretty much what you've asked for in your meeting with the Prime Minister's Cabinet Secretary, and also what you've asked for in the letter to the Prime Minister. The petition of Tom Watson, this petition calls for the government, and this is your own press release that I'm quoting it off of. The petition calls for the government to make a statement in the House of Commons to publish all documents and to consider an official apology to the Sikh community. That apology is the only difference between the two documents, or the two petitions.
Yeah, and you know, Tom Watson submitted the wording for that very early on, and I think once he started
There's
developing,
two MPs asking for the same thing, with the exception of an apology.
it's and you know,
And were representations made for them to come together and have one petition, rather than confuse an already confused public of what is going on?
what we had,
And this is all within the first 3 days,
what we
when
had
it
in
was
front-
possible, like you said, Monday 13th, 14th and 15th of the Wednesday, it was set in stone by the 15th.
But
So
I think-
when you had the opportunity,
Tom Watson
you were
petition-
wondering which horse to back. That's
Tom
how it
Watson-
looks
Tom Watson-
to the public.
Well, I think
Tom Watson petition wasn't approved for several days later. Yeah, and even though he
But you
submitted-
backed it on the 19th.
we did because
But you'd already backed Paul Uppal's on the Monday.
and
but
what was the
as you
harm in
said,
that?
there's no much
What is
difference
the
in
harm
it.
in that? Well, people, which one are you going to sign? They're both asking for the same
Sign
thing.
both. Why can't you sign both?
Why do we need to sign both? What does that show a government? That you're not sure where you stand?
No, what he showed
You
government.
either want an apology or you don't want an apology.
I tell you what he showed government. He showed government. You've got a Conservative MP very serious about this and willing to put his name to
Yep.
a petition. You've got a Labour MP very serious about this and willing to start a petition. And you've got a community who's willing to back him.
So why are the two MPs not working together?
That's the question you need to ask those MPs.
That's the question you need to ask those MPs. You're my representative.
No, but we Paul Uppal, in his
There's
own
a
right,
political reality.
has done whatever he can on this issue, and so has Tom Watson and his colleagues.
They all
Now, and that was the pressure that was built on government. So I know we can talk about these things in isolation. So why didn't the two come together? But what we have to realise that
There's no question of whether they came together.
Yeah.
My question was, did you make representations to them to join the two petitions?
No.
It's a yes or no
and I'll
answer.
tell you why. Because our approach,
No, you didn't.
No, our approach on this was that you have to recognise the political reality. The political reality, somebody in Tom Watson's position or all the other Labour MPs sitting on the opposition
They
benches,
found a stick to beat the government with.
they conveyed the profile of this in a way a Conservative MP can't. Yeah, but a Conservative MP can have access internally and try and get a solution in a way that one of the opposition MPs can't. So as an intelligent, as intelligent people, then we have to engage in that intelligently. And then what your response and your
if you said that
engagement,
to me, and I've not heard that before,
your response and your
but
engagement,
you saying
to
that to
them,
me
your response and your
would suggest to
engagement with
me
each of them,
that you should have supported Paul Uppal's efforts within the government and supported
Which we did.
Tom Watson in his efforts at addressing the thing in the House.
Which we
That
did.
does not mean separating two petitions. there was what I'm going to put to you is that the support for 2 petitions divided the support that would have been shown as 1 petition, this many signatures, that's how many people are supporting us.
But how much effort did you want us to put into trying to get 2 politicians from opposite sides?
None. Suggest to Tom Watson that it's already there. We don't need it.
But when there's there was a bigger question to ask of the government, because it was the government that.
So when did you ask that bigger question?
Well, from day one, that we wanted full
you
disclosure.
said for the first 3 days you had no idea what was going on.
No. If you look at the press release, the first day, on the first day, we sent out a press release asking for and asking the government for full disclosure. We couldn't have moved any quicker, to be honest.
One of the things about
in hindsight, you could have done things differently.
One of the things,
we couldn't have moved any quicker.
But you couldn't have moved any quicker. You asked for full disclosure on the first day.
Yes.
One of the things about the
so
petition,
did Paul Apple, and he had a petition to say so.
Yes.
Right. On the 19th, we had no insight. You backed a petition.
One of the things
that I then asked for an additional apology, and you also backed that.
One of the things you have to understand. One of the things you have to understand about the petition. One of the things you have to understand about the petition is neither Paul Apple, neither Tom Watson asked us should we put the petition up.
Yeah.
Paul Apple, the first we came to know about it was when he put it up and he tweeted it or whatever he did, and we saw that and we saw, okay, there's a petition here. And Tom Watson, we found out a couple of days later when he told us, I'll put some wording in on the 13th again. Yeah. Now, if that, that they're not going to talk to each other in terms of how they work on this, yeah, and that detail. So if they've both gone out of their way to do something, yeah, and Paul Apple goes live straight away, which we support. Tom Apple doesn't. Tom Watson doesn't go live until several days later. By that time, there's a different reasoning for it, yeah, and there is you can make an argument about why it should be supported, and we did, yeah. But we weren't consulted about whether they should start them or not. They both did it off their own back, and for us.
And that's the key difference. You see, you're assuming there was dialogue before these petitions were made live. There was no dialogue. So we couldn't influence each of those when they came live. We only acted on it because once we knew that Paul Upples had gone live, then we had to say support it. For a week, 10 days down the line, when Tom Watson's comes live, then we had no choice but to say.
If you remember the question I asked was, did you make representations to either MP? And you said no.
No, because
so I haven't assumed you did or didn't do anything. No, but I asked you, because you hadn't, and I'm asking you why you didn't.
Yeah, but
and you've
not been able to answer
together. Sorry?
About bringing them together.
It was too late.
Either about bringing them together or supporting one or the other. You supported both. So your own position, you're supporting 2 different petitions.
They were already up and live. They were already up and running.
But you said they're the same position. But you've said they've asked for the same thing.
With the exception of one difference. There's an apology on one and not an apology on the other. And you're supporting 2 different petitions which are almost asking the same thing, but one has gone a step further to ask for an apology, which was actually ridiculed by most of our own community.
Yeah. But I think that
which is why it's only got 1,600 signatures.
All you have to look at is the time frame, and when you look at the time frame, and we couldn't influence when they came live, so we only reacted to them.
But this is my question. Your reaction to them has been to support both, rather than clarify where we should be heading as a community. But then as our leaders, does that show a deficiency in your leadership?
No, if we had supported one or the other, then your question would have been, why haven't you supported, why did you support one party when you should have supported both? So for us, it's not really, we couldn't really win.
You'd have had an answer. No, the fact is, if you had done one or the other, you could have said, we did this, and in hindsight, it was wrong. What you did in the end was back 2 horses in the same race, and neither of them finished.
Well, no. They're not. The 2 horses aren't running against each other. The 2 horses are running.
I think you'll find an opposition and a government MP
the 2 horses,
loggerheads
over
most things.
But on this
you're giving your own answer then as to why we supported both.
But why did you support both?
On this issue, no, on this issue, on
a situation as grave as this, we've waited 30 years for redress, not for justice, but just for the redression of inaccurate and outright lies about our community and what we have suffered.
Let me correct you one thing. We waited 30 years about what happened in India.
Right.
We haven't waited 30 years about this because we only found out about this on the 30th of January.
No. Why, if you listen to the question was, we've waited 30 years for justice and redress. Yes.
But we only found
out. Sorry, I haven't finished the question. It will make sense once I finish it. We've waited 30 years for redression of the lies and misinformation spread about us. Right. This opportunity of a disclosure that happened overnight, if we will, was the perfect opportunity to redress all of those grievances.
I don't think you're going to address everything on the back
Well,
of this.
that's what you've asked for. You've asked for pre, post, all the way up to November 1984, and you even said yourself at some stage we want to know what happened all the way up to 1995. That's your own quotes.
No,
that's your own letter to the Prime Minister of the UK.
That is asking for the fact. That is not addressing what the media says.
What I'm saying
what
to
people
you
say about
is that
it.
everything you've asked for hasn't not transpired to become real.
At this moment
It's
in time.
become, it's been nothing but rhetoric on Sikh media, on British media, mainstream media, and the actual results on the ground are the government have rushed you, have opened and shut this case in front of you, and you've not been in a position to redress anything or to even influence anything other than the naming of the Golden Temple in their terminology as the Shri Harmandir Sahib. And other than that, the leadership and the representation hasn't been there, has it?
No, I think we've achieved a bit more than that. I think in terms of the inquiry that happened, the remit was limited. That has not finished. That is going to continue. That argument is going to continue in terms of full disclosure and more inquiries, etc. I think the collateral benefit of this is the punt has come together in a way which we haven't in a long time.
Has it come together?
I think it has, yeah. On this issue, people were working together, people were working in isolation.
There's 2 petitions. There's less than 6,000 signatures between them.
I don't think that matters in the slightest.
Does it not?
I don't think that matters in the slightest.
You know, it's not been 4 months. Sorry, I'm going to have to take an issue with what you've just said. You've just said the punt has come together like it's never come before.
Yeah.
It's not been 3 months yet since Sikhs for Justice took 1 million signatures in 4 months. 1 million to the UN in Geneva, the UNHCR.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to tell me there's 1,600 on one petition and 5,000 on another,
you're looking at
is
this.
the bunch come together like never before?
No, the bunch.
It's not quite a Sarbat Khalsa.
The bunch didn't come together to drive the petition. The bunch came together on this issue and worked together in different ways. And different people did different things at different places along that route. And some were more successful than others. But the point is, people were talking to each other and people were working to a common objective. And that, for the Sikh Council, that is a big achievement on an issue like this. If we can do it on this, we can do it on other things. The other collateral benefit that's happened as a result of all this is the media coverage we have had has served to educate people about 1984, about Sikhs, about Sikhi, yeah, in a way that's never happened before. There's been there's an article in the Times in that first week, an op-ed. The guy wrote the whole details about Ben McIntyre, about the whole history of Harmandir Sahib and why this is so important to Sikhs. Even going back and describing how Ahmed Sahib Dali demolished Harmandir Sahib and stuff. Now this has never happened in mainstream media in the UK before. Now we need to be wiser in terms of how we capitalise on that and take that even further. But I think what we have got out of this, the media coverage we've got out of this, we've never seen in 30 years. And I think part of that is symptomatic of the current media environment, social media, and we're able to capitalise on it more than perhaps our previous generations were.
Yeah.
So part of it's that, and it's a different field now. Part of it's also about the issue. The issue was that this is a UK government and it's about them. And I think on that issue, we have taken a step forward. We're not all the way yet, but nobody's giving up. Everybody's continuing, and there'll be different. There are different strategies coming out. Sikh Council UK, our biggest thing now is to bring the people together who are working on this in different ways. We're not asking them all to sit around a table and do everything collectively, because that's not what the punt is about. The punt is about different. I've always said that it is legitimate and it is good for us to have different Jatibandiyas who are strong and forthright in their own right.
Yeah.
But when it needs to, they all come together. And that's what's happened on this. We've got very strong Jatibandiyas, very strong individuals, very strong groups who are working in their own way on this, some of them a lot longer than others. But on this issue, we have shown that people can come together and move forward.
And just to add to that, any sort of big issue, any national issue before in the past where we've been we've sort of failed our own community and we've been left wanting, and because organisations have worked individually in isolation, and then each of the organisations then has to dig out the other one for not doing it the way it should have been done.
That's happened.
But that's happened many times. Yeah. But on this occasion, there might be shortcomings, and you're right to challenge us and other organisations as to how it's happened. But we can definitely say that on this occasion, that the way the Sikhs and organisation work together, they haven't before, never before in the past, and we need to build on that. And you're right, we haven't got all of what we want. All we made is maybe a few steps forward. But at least, are 500,000 Sikhs in the UK and many other
700,000,
and then many other 100,000 in Europe that are watching this program,
yep.
and who want to know what's happening. They can see that the Sikh organisations, for once here, are now are singing and voicing their concerns with a single voice. And that's important. That's important for government as well. When we had those meetings with the cabinet secretary, and you might say, well, you didn't get anything out of them, but we beg to differ. And why we beg to differ is because you're going to have a relationship with the government. If you don't get all your way, you don't throw your toys out the pram. So you're going to have to engage. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to work at it and make sure that those circles in government understand what our pain is,
but
and understand what we do want at the end of the day. Due to a
lack of time, we are going to have to finish this here.
Okay.
But I do have issues with what you're saying still, but we don't have time to address them, unfortunately.
To be honest, I commend you for asking hard questions.
Yeah.
Because those ones who within Sikh organisations that represent Sikhs and represent Sikhs in their masses, we should be asked those questions, because at the end of the day, if we're representing organisations and we're representing Sikhs, especially with government, we shouldn't be afraid of answering tough questions. So on that one, I commend you. We'll be more than happy to come back again. And by the way, none of us are sort of paid, and we're all volunteers. So we do this to the best of our ability. So the interview you had last week, none of us, we are all sevadars, and we do it to the best of our ability, to what we know, right. and the circles we are involved in. So you're right. Maybe you need to have these conversations 20, 30 years down the line, when Sikh organisations have proper legal representation, when they have proper parliament representation. Then you can really ask the hard questions.
We suffered a genocide 30 years ago.
Yeah.
How come we don't have that already?
I think that's a big question. That's something from the Sikh
Council. Television.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty much run by Sevadars.
Yeah.
No, it is.
I'm one. I don't get paid. Most days of the week.
There's a big lack of community infrastructure within this country for our community. When you look at other communities and what they have in place, we're way behind, and that's something we see. Council. Can I just
with regards to the representation you're saying that you've had with the government and what have you, it took us 3 days. We started on Monday morning demanding access to number 10, to Hugo Swire, to William Hague, or to Saida Warsi, Baroness Warsi, as is. Yeah? By Wednesday afternoon, we were told that we were going to get a video response from the Prime Minister himself. We're volunteers, and we managed to get a response from number 10. And to anybody watching this, and anybody that wants to claim that they influenced that decision from number 10, feel free to go on whichever media you want, Facebook it, Twitter it, do what you want. And if you can prove and show the emails, because we at the accountants team have 40 to 50 emails back and forth over those 3 days, and countless telephone calls. And people have even suggested, that I suggested on Sunday evening, that Alistair Campbell worked for Tony Blair from 97 to 2003 and isn't actually the press secretary today. Well, that's Alistair Campbell. This is Alistair Campbell. And he does work for the press secretary. He is the press secretary of David Cameron as we speak. And I have his mobile phone number. I gave it to the Sikh Federation representative on Sunday night. It was unfortunate that he didn't know which Alistair Campbell works at number 10. Considering everybody is talking about, we've had contact and we've done this and back and forth with the number 10 and Downing Street and the Foreign Office, when they don't know that Lydia Strachan is the press officer for William Hague and Saida Warsi and Hugo Swire. And we've, within 3 days, got a response off of the Prime Minister.
Can I say, I don't have any issue with everything you're saying.
And we're volunteers.
And I'd like to commend Sangat TV, but also the other media as well. And the Sikh media has stepped up to the plate on this, and some more than others in different ways, etc. And you push the boat out in that way. That's really good. And we're sitting here today answering these hard questions, which also has a role.
Well, I have an issue with Sikh media. I don't think that it has stepped up to the plate.
I think they have in different ways, and I think
really, what different ways? Making a frenzy, giving people false expectations, allowing people like the 1984 Sikh Genocide Coalition to completely, if they had been allowed on mainstream television, they would have alienated the Sikh community here in Britain. with the sort of rhetoric and venom that they had been spitting all over the Sikh media. And the Sikh media didn't try to rein that in. It was we'll have more of the same, more of the same. It was an absolute saturation of pure rhetoric. And where we ended up, we ended up with an open and shut case within 3 days, like you said yourself.
You need to look at your audiences and things, and who are you targeting and things. And I think the Sikh media is very much targeting the Sikh audience. And I think what the Sikh media did do was raise awareness of this very quickly and in a sustained way. Now that has to be commended.
But I do agree with you in one sense that. We do need to manage expectations, and even now we need to manage expectations. So and that's why it's important to work with parliamentarians, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be promising, our Sikhs in the UK and Europe that we can achieve this when really, and the parliamentarians can't walk along with you. So I agree with you that you can't. It just can't be slogans. It just can't be as in the past, whether we have slogans and we live and die by slogans. It's going to have to be a more considered approach.
Okay.
And we from the Sikh Council have tried to give that. To be honest, not just gives rhetoric and slogans, but to actually give a considered approach on this, and where it makes sense.
Yeah. On that, there's no perfect science to this. There isn't a manual you can pick up and tick off. We've done this, and we're going to get everything.
There is. It's called procedure, parliamentary procedure.
No, there is, but even that won't give you the answer.
No, but it's a guideline.
Well, no, parliamentary procedure won't tell you how to get an independent inquiry out of the Prime Minister.
I'll tell you what, the Highway Code isn't going to tell you how to drop a gear in the middle of a race.
There's no perfect science to this, yeah. And we have to be intelligent about how we move forward from this, and we learn from what we've done. We pick up we put our hands up and we say yes. In the first statement we did put Golden Temple, but after that
that was the letter to the Prime Minister 4 times.
But there
was no mention of the Shri Harmandir Sahib.
No, even in our first press statement and everything, we did put Golden Temple, but we've acknowledged that, we've learned from that, we picked up on that, we moved on from there, and we refer to Shri Harmandir Sahib now as he should be.
Yep.
But there's no perfect science to this. There's no manual that you can pick up and say this is how it's done, and you will get everything you want in a bag. If it was that easy, we wouldn't be sitting here today. This would have been done a long time ago. Yeah.
Or if you had a different approach, more professional.
But we
wouldn't be sitting here today having this conversation.
I can assure you, we are looking back and we're looking at what we did and what we can learn from that and how we can move on.
That's the ardas of everybody.
And that's the key thing here.
Yeah.
Is we will make mistakes, we will do things right, and we will get some things wrong. But overall, I think we've moved forward in this last few weeks. As a bunch, we move forward. Sikh Council UK definitely move forward, and we're going to be looking at how we continue and sustain that.
Baji, thank yous. I agree with everything you've just said there. It is time to move forward. We have now analysed and appraised what has happened over the last month or so. Like you say, we've made mistakes. I agree with those mistakes. I agree we've made mistakes. I agree that it possibly could have been inexperience or caught on the hop, so to speak. And these questions that we've been given to yourselves and to the Sikh Federation, and the questions we would have given to the people that chose not to be here and participate, but yet claim to represent the Sikh community in the UK, that's unfortunate for them. But the questions have been valid, and you've been good enough as men of your word to come here, answer our questions. But when we move forward from here, everybody should be on notice, really, that the Sikh community, which is our generation now, are going to expect results, are going to accept a more robust approach, and that this opportunity lost is the final opportunity that should be lost. And in that hope, everybody I know is doing the ardas for your safalta, for the Sikh Council UK and the Sikh Federation and any other organisation that wants to step up to the plate, as one panth, one pain, and understand that it's time for egos to disappear. It's time for the Sikh nation to move forward and be represented the way it deserves to be represented, and that the British government should be held to account properly for any involvement whatsoever in Operation Blue Star, regardless of how remote, regardless of whether that advice was taken on board or whether it was ignored or whether it was, in William Hague's own words, whether it was insignificant. they need to be held to account.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
as far as we're concerned, your responsibility that you've taken, and have been bestowed with that responsibility. But I do thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it greatly. There would have been every reason for having this on Sunday, but it wasn't possible. But
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, then, that's it for tonight. The Sikh Council has spoken. Whether you agree with what they've said, whether you think it was adequate, whether you don't, and whether you think I was harsh, or whether you think that my questions are invalid, that is absolutely your prerogative and your choice. I appreciate your own comments, so feel free to comment and let us know what you thought of the process, of the questions I've asked, of their answers, of whatever it is that you want to get off your plate. Get it off your plate. Go to work a happy person in the morning, and don't let this annoy you too much. But yeah, feel free to leave any comment at gsatwal@sangattelevision.org. That's been Encounters tonight. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.